Sorry, assholes, your quiet day at the office is about to get severely fucked up.
Guys, welcome back to another edition of the After Action Review. You know me, I'm Nick Guy, painfully mediocre and okay. And as per usual, we have more than okay guests. Once again, we're welcoming back Adam Holroyd, founder of the hottest tactical manufacturing company in the world right now, Spiritus Systems. But we already got into that. You guys, if you haven't seen the episode, go back. It's about 4 or 5 episodes ago. Listen to what he had to say, his story of starting this incredible company and his experiences that led to, probably the best strip on the market. But last time, Adam, we touched on COP Keating and what happened there, and he was on the QRF. So we're just going to – I really wanted to bring him back on and hear it from the horse's mouth and get perspective on, what happened. So, Adam, first off, dude, thanks so much for coming back on.
Yeah, of course. No problem.
It's always a pleasure, always a privilege. So just kind of take us back to the beginning, the situation that led to COP Keating being overrun, how you guys were on QRF, and what happened after.
Yeah, sure. So first off, I'm going to just start off with saying that, my perspective is small in the overall scheme of maneuver. Being a sniper team leader, I had a very small element, and my, what I could see on this was kind of limited to just what I was doing. So I'm not going to get into like the high level scheme of maneuver and timelines and stuff like that, because quite frankly, until I was inside the COP, I didn't really understand the significance of what was going on. It was just kind of another day in Afghanistan, right? Our unit this was pretty much standard, operating procedure for us, and for myself for the last 2 years before this had happened, right? So our previous deployment was very kinetic. We lost a ton of guys. It was our battalion stood up the Pesh River Valley, the Korengal Valley, outposts, Bella, Aranis, all those kind of places that people know about in the Kunar province. This attack being further up north in Nuristan, that day that it happened, I think it was like October 3rd of 2009 was when the COP got overran. Right. So COP Keating and the guys that were there on the complex attack that happened, that was going on. And I was actually on a different operation as a sniper team leader the same time frame. So, how it went down for us is we'd actually just come off that operation. We had just like refitted all of our stuff, right? Like our priorities of work, we just made, we did them the right way. So we got off, I think we actually got off the helicopter, went back, cleaned our weapons, repacked our stuff, and I went to sleep actually. And, it was real dark in our hooch, and the door opened, and I kind of heard people talking, and I heard, hey, we need one of the sniper teams. There's 4 teams in our platoon that needs to, we need them for a QRF. There's been a outpost that has gotten overrun. And so I kind of woke up and started talking to people, and I think they were initially going to send team 4. I was on team 3, and then it just so happened that we were just ready to go, right? Team 4, I think maybe one of their guys was like at the gym or something, and they would have to like run and get them. So they were like, hey guys, we just need you to grab your rucks and just get out to the LZ. So that's what we did. Me and my shooter. I'm not going to say his name. I'm not sure if he really wants to be on here, but anyways, he's a really good dude. He's still kind of active, so I don't want to like blow him out here. But we basically went to the LZ. We met up with a headquarters element from our battalion. So it was it was like a first sergeant, a fires guy, the company RTO, stuff like that. And then there was a platoon as well from our battalion. And we loaded up on helicopters, a couple Chinooks, some Blackhawks, and we started this like kind of trek up north, right? So that's kind of how it started out. And I don't even honestly remember what time of day that was, but I just remember I got on a Blackhawk, and it was doors open. They were basically like, hey, we're gonna land at a hot LZ. So you guys, like, we're probably gonna land the Chinook. We're gonna loiter with the Blackhawk. I mean, it's like kind of ridiculous to think that they were gonna throw us into this, aerial shooting charade. I was like, that's not a good plan, but whatever. So it's a big misconception about snipers. But so anyways,
do you guys do aerial shooting in the Bravo 4 course?
Not in the Bravo 4, not down at sniper school, but you can do it. You can get exposure to it a couple ways. I mean, international sniper competition, and then honestly, just if your unit is kind of turned on, then you can absolutely get exposed to that. So at that point in my career, I was not exposed to it. So I was like, hey, this isn't a good plan. Like, we're not, I mean, I understood the concept. We had done like tons of like classroom stuff on it. Some of the more senior guys were exposed to it. But I was like, hey, this is not a good plan. I mean, if it's the only plan, we'll do what we have to do, but it's not a capability we possess right now. So we started flying up north, which it required stops, right? We had to stop at Fob Bostic, I believe. I think it was only one stop, but I don't really remember. But we stopped, we refueled the helicopters, and then we took back off, and we actually landed up at OP Fritchie, which was the supporting element, the high ground element of COP Keating, right? So that's where we actually ended up landing. And my understanding was that during the attack, there was like a mortar element up there, but during the attack, Fritchie was decisively engaged as well. So the enemy knew, basically we have to like pin this OP down and make it fight for its own survival so that it can't support, the proper fob down there. So that's where we ended up landing.
Was at that time, I mean, had the Taliban exhibited this level of complexity up to this point? Like the idea of being like, hey, they have a fire support element on the high ground. If we're going to take Keating, we need to decisively engage that. That seems like it's, traditional military tactics, not really something that the Taliban was known for, fighting a guerrilla war.
Yeah. So, good question. 2007 timeframe, I was on the Pesh, I was in the Korngal. That was basically the type of fighting that was going on. The enemy was decisively engaging elements, trying to mass, right? That was like a common tactic, especially in the Korngal, really trying to mass. And honestly, it caused us to shift our tactics in a big way. So, a good example would be like a machine gun team. Instead of the gunner only carrying a 50-round starter belt, he was carrying 1,000 rounds on his body, right? So he had the gun and 1,000 rounds, and the AG had 1,000 rounds, and everybody in the platoon had a 100-round link in their ruck because it was self-support. And then we did a lot of 60-millimeter mortar support, and then just our organic mortars to the company. They were probably the heroes of the battle there because, they fired. I mean, there was not a day that went by that there was not somebody in the battalion in contact that entire deployment. I mean, if there was, I don't remember it. It was just constant. But that was the tactic, right? They started learning, and they used some of this stuff to attack COP Keating. They were learning how we fight and how we respond. The Army is very good at like, hey, this is the battle drill. You receive contact, this is where you go. this is where the private goes. He goes to this machine gun, he picks the machine gun up, he starts shooting, his buddy comes up, he starts feeding the gun. It's like they were just learning that. So they were attacking COP Keating before this just to get the data. They come, shoot some RPGs at it, shoot at it, see where everybody ran to, including OP Fritchie. So they knew that, like, hey, the OP is going to start raining mortars down on us very quickly. These guys are combat veterans. They're not fucking around. So we need to pin that OP down. But that's where we ended up. We landed there. We offloaded. Honestly, I don't even remember how many birds it was that took, like, how long it took us to do that. There was a little bit of a dwell time at the OP. And then we started our movement down the mountain, right? So I remember pretty high elevation and comparatively where OP Fritchie was. And so we just had to start making our way down, not really knowing what we were going to find. And we were actually the last people in the element. So it was myself and my sniper buddy. We were the last two, kind of bringing up the rear, right? Which is kind of where I wanted to be, So we're kind of bringing up the rear, and we were dropping mortars. We were basically fan firing mortars in front of our, however far out, fan fire 120s from OP Fritchie, move down to that area, fan fire 120s. We did come across guys that, I remember a 240 gunner that was walking, the whole element walked past this ditch and didn't see these two guys in the ditch, like Taliban fighters or whatever. We'll just say Taliban. They might not have been Taliban. They're probably foreign assholes or whatever. But we were walking by, and this 240 gunner from the supporting platoon, he just happened to look down and see these guys. So he pulled out his Beretta and just smoked both of these dudes, right? Before, like they were hiding in this. Yeah. So this guy, like, straight up was like, oh man. And he, like, pop, pop, pop. And I just heard, I was like, oh shit, here it goes. But yeah, it was just him. Those dudes were hiding in a ditch, trying to kind of evade. And I'm sure they were, like, pretty scared because they just had 120s rain down on them like crazy. So they were probably pretty scared there. But so that was the only contact, though, we made on the way down, right? But it was really surreal experience because we could see the we could see the fire base from time to time through the trees and stuff. And it was, there was smoke billowing from it. And as we got closer, the smoke was getting worse, other buildings were catching on fire and things were starting, it was just deteriorating. The attack was over, but it was, it just kind of was the stuff that had happened before was just burning everything down. And it was nightfall by the time we got to the base of the mountain. And so just under nods, just kind of watching the area, we're just kind of stopped. We're, like, kind of giving everything a pause to let, see what's going to happen. Trying to make contact with the guys inside the fob. We're doing a link up, right? And, if you know anything about link ups for the audience, it's like the most dangerous time, especially after somebody just went through something like that, right? I don't believe we did make contact with them either. I think we tried and we couldn't make contact. That could be wrong, but I don't remember hearing any radio traffic. And then we walked down to the perimeter and we had to figure out a way in. So they had concertina wire. It was, I can't remember. I think we cut through the wire and then just kind of let ourselves in. And this is where stuff really started to, like, go downhill in terms of what kind of day we were going to have, right? So we didn't really know the full story yet. Nobody knew the full story yet. So we were walking in, and I remember the first thing that I saw was, there's a U.S. soldier on the ground with, like, his brains fucking blown out, just in the moon dust. Super weird feeling because, the Army, it's like, we don't leave, like, ammo cans unsecured. So, like, seeing a person there, it's kind of like a weird feeling. And then, so we continued on. I mean, we checked him out. We continued on. And there was an entire M2, 50 cal barrel, a whole assembly just in the moon dust. Like the enemy was trying to recover it or something. And it just, like, they're like, this thing's freaking heavy, man. Like, just leave it. So they just dropped it in the moon dust. And there was just carnage, man. I mean, that's when we really started to get a feel of, like, it was no joke. I mean, these guys, they experienced an overwhelming attack, right? It was uncommon for sure. You know, we linked up eventually. And like I said, I was at the back of the element. So I don't know who performed the link up. I don't really know how that even like went down. But we successfully linked up. And then I remember we went to the aid station, right, where all the casualties were. And there was and I don't know his name. I don't know anything about him, but there was a medic in there. And he was the only guy. It really struck me because he was the only guy in that aid station. He just said, you know, collectively to all of us, he just said, I just didn't want to leave them here alone, you know, like I just didn't want to leave the bodies here. I didn't know what to do, you know, and so we're just like, fuck, you know, like we got it, you know, like we're here now, like we'll help you out. So it was 4 of us. I mean, we set in a perimeter, you know, we did infantry stuff, like the platoon that was there, they're squared away. They pushed out a perimeter, and they locked it down. And then being part of kind of the headquarters, I mean, there was no contact going on. There was an AC-130 on station the entire time. Like they weren't coming back to play anymore, right? And so we just started doing what, like, kind of finding work, you know, like what can we do to like make this better? And when we first got there, we didn't know we were dismantling the COP, right? We just knew that we were there as a QRF to like bolster the force, to help out whatever we could do. And so myself, my sniper buddy, the company RTO actually, and a sergeant who's actually a good friend of mine, but from my first deployment, he was actually, he might have been a staff sergeant at that time, but doesn't matter. He, you know, us 4, we were the ones who carried all of the casualties to the LZ. So that was kind of like the first order of business, right? It was like we had to get these guys. It's kind of a maze of a COP, right? So we had to get them, and we had to move them through the barracks. Well, it wasn't even a barrack. It was like, I'm not sure what it was. It was some room, but that's basically where a lot of these guys were now, right? They were centrally located. They had kind of Alamoed in a couple of buildings. And so we started moving, you know, the casualties through there. And I just remember it being very, you know, very emotional for them. Obviously, my first choice would not have been to move the casualties through, but there was no other way out. It was just how it was constructed. And it was like, we just got to do it. So we tried to respectfully move these guys through as quick as we could. And then we got them out to the LZ, and, you know, Blackhawks came in and, as you know, took guys as they could, and we got those guys out of there. So that was, you know, that was kind of like the first order of business. And I remember that, you know, that night, there were some guys, like the AC-130 was seeing some stuff on the scope. So it was like, hey, we got guys over here. Is that you? We're like, no. And so they, you know, they were shooting pretty much all night, just kind of shooting at guys. And we just kind of, like, me and my sniper buddy were just laying there on the ground, and it was like this surreal, like it was like the moon was out, and you could see the AC-130 kind of pass in front of it every couple minutes, right, as it orbited. And a little bit of cloud cover, but it was just weird, right? It was just eerie. It was really quiet. We were expecting such a, you know, like a thing, and it really just turned into like, hey, there's nothing else to do tonight, right? We're just like bed down. So we just chilled, you know, security, pulled guard, normal things. And then the next day is when the real work kind of started. And that, you know, the work was, my sniper buddy and I were essentially tasked with cleaning up sensitive items. So we were going out, and that's where we got really a firsthand exposure to just the absolute carnage that had happened. I mean, there was a 1151 up armored Humvee that had a perfect, like, softball sized hole through the armored glass, and then like through the seat, you know, and then like it was just like through the bottom of the Humvee. I don't know if it was like a Spig 9 or something, just like recoilless rifle, straight, like direct lay right into it. You know, there was a plate in there that you could tell like a guy just like took one. You know, it was just like taking apart all that stuff, right, that had failed. Honestly, it was just it was so overwhelming, the battle, that like equipment failures that I've never seen. A 240, I went to charge it and I could not move the charging handle at all. So I had to like kick it, you know, I had to like kick the charging handle, and it was just like seized, you know, 50 cals that we couldn't charge. All of the mortar tubes had bullet holes through them, multiple bullet holes through them. So what we started learning as we were peeling back the layers of this is that, like, they decisively engaged the mortars. You know, that was one of the things that they knew they had to take away the indirect fire. The tubes were like Swiss cheese. So we knew that they took those out early, and then they targeted all the gun trucks, right? A lot of their positions were gun trucks, and they just targeted them. And they knew exactly where these guys were going to come out of their barracks. So they targeted the entrances as well. Yeah, so I mean, it was a couple of days of that. I mean, there were enemy, you know, casualties on the compound that were, I mean, they were like, I mean, there was a couple. I mean, like, I did talk to Romachet for like very briefly. He was one of the few guys that would kind of emerge from this Alamo, and he was like, I remember him kind of just standing there, and he was like, yeah, that guy over there, I saw him smiling or whatever, right? Like, he thought that the battle was over. He didn't realize that there were some of us still alive. So I just like shot him in the back of the fucking head, you know? And like that dude who had like, he was just like a UXO. He had like all these RPGs, and like, you know, we had to move Humvees, like, because, you know, by now for some way we had known, like, hey, we're blowing this place up. We're leaving, right? We're like, we have a certain amount of time, and then we're going to blow as much up as we can. And then we are going to fly out of here, and a B-1 bomber is going to come in and just destroy the rest of it. And so we were we were kind of tasked with like moving all these vehicles and getting them online. And then there was like some combat engineers, I believe. It might've been an EOD guy. He was like cratering charges and all these vehicles, stuff like that, just whatever they had on hand for demo, trying to kind of, you know, pee for plenty everything. Mm-hmm. And so my shooter and I, we kind of were like, let's try to recover a bunch of this guy's stuff too, right? These guys just went through this. They have a bunch of like personal items. So we went into their barracks and like just packed duffel bags and like threw those in a pile to just try to like anything we could grab that looked like it might be important personal stuff, right? So we did that. We couldn't get it all. The building we were in was on fire. It sounds so crazy right now to think that like we were like, man, these guys' stuff is important. Let's go in this burning building and grab it. But at the moment, it seemed important to us, you know. So
that's not crazy, dude.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, it seems
like I know, like in hindsight, you think to yourself, that's
it's a little crazy.
That's fucking nuts. Like, I went into a burning building to recover personal items, family photos,
stuff. I mean, whatever we could.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't want to cut you off, but
it's fine.
I want to circle back. One of the first things that you mentioned once you guys made entry to Keating was an American service member who was dead, just lying in the open. Man. For those listening that aren't familiar, that haven't served or they're civilians, that shit is unheard of in the modern United States Army or military on a whole. Like the whole idea of recovering the dead, like this is asymmetric warfare. Like we are the biggest, baddest dudes on the battlefield. So when we do take
war tourism, man,
we are immediately recovering them because we control the battle space. You can't control casualties. You're going to take casualties, but we control the battle space. So we can at least move our dead and wounded. So just to see like a dead American soldier just in the open, that is literally unheard of. It is. It
was chaos.
So that was the first thing that struck me over this was, again, I can't overstate how strange that is. And that's a testament to how bad the situation was. These guys are Alamo. They can't, like, they can't even recover their dead. They are combat ineffective. They've taken so many casualties. They can't, like you said, man, the tubes are Swiss cheese. The guns have totally fucking seized.
Yeah.
At that point, they're hunkering down with personal weapons and just waiting for the inevitability.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I didn't have a lot of time to talk to guys. I mean, they were pretty beat down. Rightfully so. And that's something that, I have heard like people talk shit about it and it's like all the quarterback, bullshit that people say, but they weren't there. So they didn't get that impression of like the entire place was on fire. It was on fire. I mean, they had shot so much stuff at this fob that like basically every building was on fire. Right. all of the vehicles were damaged in some capacity. I mean, whether it was RPG, whether it was Spig 9, whether it was, armor-piercing rounds.
Dude, that's the other thing, man. Like what you described, that doesn't really sound like an RPG going through an up-armored. Like,
yeah, no,
that is probably
like a perfect circle, man. I just remember looking through.
Sounds like a Spig 9.
Yeah,
now,
it was
scary. For those that aren't familiar, Spig 9 is this massive Soviet-era recoilless rifle that takes time to set up. It's on this massive tripod. It's not man-portable in the least. The thing is huge.
Yeah, it's huge. It's advanced, but it's extremely effective. Honestly,
it is. But
it's a scary
the
weapon.
idea that they had pre-sighted those gun positions with a Spig 9, again, that complexity, man. That's
And these guys fought for it. I mean, they didn't. I don't know if it's a misconception or not, but they didn't just give up the ghost. They fought for it. A lot of these guys, actually, I would say all of them, lost their lives in defense of that little piece of America, I'll call it, because they were like, hey, we're not giving it up. I mean, they all went to fighting positions. They did what they were supposed to, and it was just overwhelming. And it was decisive in the sense that the enemy had all of the high ground. Once OP Fritchie was gone, or it was in its own battle, right? It was defending itself. It was. I think it was pretty much done for them. I know Cass took a while to get up there. Whenever we started getting that far up north, you start having a real problem with Apaches. They come on station and they're like, "Hey, man, your JTAC is basically calling targets before the Apaches even get on station because they only have a couple of minutes of burn time and then they have to leave. So they're coming in guns hot and they're going Winchester as fast as they can and they're leaving. Same with A-10s, right? A-10s come on station. They can only be there for so long. And so if you don't have a JTAC who is very, very talented, which we were lucky to have JTACs attached directly to our unit on this deployment, if you don't have, a TAC-P or JTAC or whatever, CCT, that who is not very talented, you're going to have trouble getting those air assets to be very effective in that situation. So, but it was, it was a surreal experience for me as a young NCO. I felt like the chain of command so I want to separate first off, there was the platoon that was with us, and that platoon, like the leadership of that platoon. So I'm not talking about them, right? They were phenomenal. I think that
guys at Keating.
Yeah, the guys at Keating, and then also our QRF platoon, right?
Mm-hmm.
So our 132 QRF platoon that was there, their leadership, good dudes, solid dudes, did everything right, helped out with everything, willing to get it done. I'm talking about my direct kind of command, like headquarters element guys. Not really the best example to set for the rest of us during this, right? I'm an E5 at the time, pretty low ranking as far as like the rank that was there. We had a first sergeant there, we had a couple E7s, and somehow I'm directing traffic here, right? I'm like, hey, maybe we should get these casualties to the LZ, right? Like maybe we should start doing that now because the birds are on the way. And there's 8 of them, right? And they're heavy. People are heavy, and it's we want to be respectful and do this right. So, there's that. It was just kind of weird, man. I mean, there was like a level of disrespect I felt that those guys, like my direct command, I felt like, they were very concerned with stuff that just did not matter. And we were trying to do like some real work to get this place phased out, right? And so, I mean, I think I left off where we were cleaning up, right? Cleaning up. I was finding night vision. I was finding radios. I mean, we were, machine guns everywhere. I mean, we were basically trying to, there was an officer from their unit who was talking to me quite a bit, which again, I'm an E5, right? Why is this coming at me? But whatever, I'm just taking it as it comes. He's like, give me a list of stuff like, hey, we're missing these items still, we think they're out there. And so we're going back out and just searching, and we're finding them. I think we recovered mostly everything. But it's stuff that's important, it's like, we don't want to leave, night vision on the battlefield. We don't want to leave 240s on the battlefield, so we're grabbing all that stuff. and we're just giving it back to this unit so they can get accountability so we can get out of here, right? And I remember we ended up like loading up, we let these guys load up, and then we collapsed out. We get on a Chinook as well. We circled a few times. They had time fused, all the explosive stuff, and so we watched. I mean, I think some of it went off. I didn't see it all myself because I was packed into the Chinook with everyone else, so I didn't really see it. But I think it went off, and then we started making our way back down to Fob Bostic, where we were gonna kind of, it's nighttime again, right? We're flying. It takes a while to get there, and we land there. So yeah, I mean, that was basically the Keating experience, right? It was a very surreal experience for me. It was very defining in terms of, how important it is to, there's just like the little details of leadership. You know what I mean? Like when you're in a situation where there's been a loss of life, and there's been, a large loss of life, it's, making sure that you are being respectful of that. It's like we all kind of become desensitized to war and death and all that in the Army. But, when it's not your unit, it was almost like a little numbing, right? Like I felt compassion for those guys, but at the same time, it was just a different feeling because it wasn't my unit, right? If it was 8 of my dudes, like our previous deployment, the reaction would have been very different coming from us. But I felt like it was defining in the sense that you have to step up as a leader and kind of overcome the emotions that you're feeling, compassion for other people, stuff like that. You have to really know when it's time to let a dude kind of rest his head on your shoulder, but also we got a lot of work to do, and it needs to get done or else it's not going to get done, And so it was defining time. I mean, I know my shooter, he was a real young guy. It was his first deployment. And he was, being exposed to that was definitely, we still talk about it to this day. It was just it's not often that you see that level of carnage, right? It was not a good, I'm just thinking how to say this. It just wasn't a good day for the U.S. Army, right? We had guys that were put in a bad position, and they knew it, but it just kind of, it's one of those decisions that maybe it got passed up and people were just kind of like, whatever, just everyone's on the low ground, and they didn't really understand how bad that place was in a bowl and how steep the terrain was and how close all the fingers were, so, but yeah, I mean, that was basically the COP Keating experience, man, from a QRF perspective, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it's going to be tough. I mean, obviously there are a few accounts from inside the COP.
Sure.
Obviously there's a Medal of Honor citation that came out of the COP. But
2, I believe now, right?
Was it 2?
Yeah, I think they it was awarded later, but I think there were 2. I mean, don't quote me on that. I think there were.
So
probably rightfully so, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, so you had, like you said, a dark day in the United States Army.
Yeah.
But the story inside is told, and it's easy to tell because it's documented, and the QRF goes in, they can get an idea. But I thought it was important to sit down with you and hear about your experiences as part of the QRF, because
Sure.
you're going to have probably the rawest experience to that, and as to the aftermath. If COP Keating had gone different, it would have been, there would have been awards for valor, and they staved off
Sure.
a complex enemy attack, things like that. But the fact of the matter was, they didn't. They couldn't. Yep. They were just totally overwhelmed. They had every tactical disadvantage in a firefight. They did. They had the low ground, and it wasn't just low ground; it was steep low ground. I mean, Christ, even with indirect fire, that's tough. Those are tough calculations for that.
Yeah.
For fusing and things like that. Like when you're getting shot at, that it just exponentially makes things more difficult. It's not like you're hitting something on the same plane. Like now things have become entirely more complex. If they had snipers in the COP during the attack. Now they're taking the opposite of a high angle shot, and which is also difficult. And it just everything that was stacked against them or could be stacked against them was. But coming in and seeing the carnage on both sides, because they, I think it's clearly obvious that they fought like hell. They fought like lions. It was just the situation, the hand that they were dealt.
They were dealt a dirty hand, and I mean it was an eye opener. I would say that COP Keating was, if we go backwards in time to my first deployment, we had a colonel in charge of our battalion. He's a general now. His last name's Cavoli. He was a pioneer of the COP, right? The whole combat outpost, right? The first COP actually was the Korngal outpost with a K, right? I mean, I don't know if this is the first one. It was the first one that was really recognized as like, hey, this is a disparate thing out in the frontier. It's not supported very well. These guys are just going to have to slug it out. We're deep in enemy territory. We're disrupting supply lines. We're doing, honestly, the shit the Army is supposed to do when we're fighting another force. And I agreed, even as a young, I deployed into Afghanistan as a PFC, right? Like nobody, dumb shit. That like I just was in a platoon, but I agreed. Like when we started hearing this plan, I was like, yeah, that makes sense to me, right? We need to be out there. We can't really do anything from inside one of these really big kind of massive fobs, right? We need to be out of these combat outposts. And so, I spent the next 16 months in a fire base that only had 2 platoons, right? It was a dog company mounted platoon, and it was our light infantry platoon. And so it was mountain warfare to the T. I mean, we were hiking up massive mountains, carrying everything with us, food, water, no helicopters to support us really, no CAS. It had to be like a troops in contact for a bird to even get redirected anywhere near that. It was all in Iraq in 2007. And I think we really learned a lot of lessons from that, that fighting, that 16 months, but the enemy was also learning as well, right? And this is years later. The enemy is like, okay, these guys are going to position themselves in the low ground on these kind of like micro fobs. We have to mass on these things to decisively beat them. And we don't need to fight them out on patrol. We're never going to beat them on patrol. There, 6 of them and 6 of us. It's like their odds are not good in a frontal attack. But this way, they can catch us where they control the battle space, right? They control the timing. They control how often they kind of harass you. They can do all these psychological things to you before they attack. So, I mean, I think there's another, that the thing we were talking about earlier with that award citation stuff, that battle is another example of, us being in a low ground surrounded with no OPs on the high ground. And what made our outcome different, the enemy was massing on us in the same exact way they were massing on Keating. But the difference was we dominated air power, right? We had learned the lesson from Keating, that basically we had to have something on station immediately to start, kind of, and our mortars too. Our mortars were just set up a little differently. They weren't quite as low, right? They were up at a little bit of a higher elevation. And so those factors though, me being, again, a sergeant, from my point of view, what helped us was the fact that we got decisively engaged. A B-1 bomber came on station. It dropped all 26,000 pounds of bombs. It flew off station. Another one came to replace it. Just a massive amount of like airlift capability that like, and I think of like, sometimes I get weird about this stuff where I think of like, there's us on the ground and then there's the JTAC that was there, and he's talking to the pilot of the B-1 bomber on SATCOM as they're flying from Kyrgyzstan or wherever, right? And they're like Qatar. I'm not even sure where they come out of, but they're going supersonic. The U.S. government is literally burning fuel at a rate of insanity So this plane full of bombs can come, and then so kind of just like a weird, kind of weird thing there. But those B-1 bombers and the mortars, and just how we were organically supporting, but we had to have aircraft, or else we would have had the same outcome.
Well, it's just it's weighing the factors, right? Like in the battle that you're discussing, the factors were similar in the sense that you guys had the low ground.
Sure.
The enemy had the tactical advantage of the high ground.
They did.
They had the tactical advantage of the numbers. How do we, that's the difference between Keating and what was the specific engagement?
Barge Matal.
That's it.
Yeah.
The difference is how does the United States leverage its assets to even the battle space? In this case, it was air power and indirect fires that could continue mission. But that's interesting. And I don't want anybody to get the wrong impression, because a lot of people, and Christ, on this podcast, I literally had a Marine vet tell me that air power is overrated and it takes the infantry fight. And
I mean, it can. You could use it improperly.
You can.
Sure.
You can.
Yeah, you can use it improperly.
You can, but if you have a decent JTAC, and
which
honestly,
we did,
and that's like one of the things that I pride myself on, is being a decent JTAC, is proper employment and weaponeering of the systems that you have at your disposal. But in this regard, it doesn't take away from the infantry fight. It literally levels the playing field. Like you said, the idea that the United States is a supersonic strategic bomber, loaded with 26,000 pounds of ordnance that is just screaming its way through Afghan airspace, and that JTAC isn't even waiting, because he's on SATCOM. He's not even waiting for that aircraft to get on station. He's going to do what we call an enhanced target description. He says, listen, you guys are going to come over this fucking ridge, and here's what you're going to see on your pod. And when you see that in your pod, they're going to be here, here, and here. So before they even get on station, that aircraft knows exactly where it's employing its weapon systems. That's impressive. That's
and it was
really good JTAC to say, here's an enhanced target description. You're not even seeing it. You and I aren't going to correlate with what we're seeing, but I'm describing it so well that when you guys get on station, you guys can immediately employ. You guys are going to give me an in-call with direction or heading, however you want to do it as a JTAC. I'm going to give you a clearance, and we're going to drop bombs, and we're going to decisively defeat this enemy. That's impressive.
Yeah, and it was so I'm from South Dakota, which is where the B-1 bombers, my dad was in the Air Force at Ellsworth. So when, I have this personal connection with the B-1, I mean, I saw it as a kid, B-52s, B-1s taking off, doing sorties, just daily, you just hear them taking off. Seeing them in combat was a different kind of feeling. But I remember, we're basically just, the mountain's on fire. This B-1 comes in, and this is Barge Matal again. We're kind of getting off topic here, but whatever. And it's coming on station. It was a female talking to the JTAC, right? And all of this chaos that's going on in it, and it's scary, right? But somebody hears a female voice. And dudes start coming out of the woodwork. They're like, "Hey, man, can you just have her confirm something or do something?" And so the JTAC's like, "Hey, can you?" And she talks, and everybody's like, "Oh my god, I bet she's so beautiful," And then, but I found it funny because, and I don't know how a B-1 bomber is set up. If it was the pilot, or if it was a Wizzo, or who was actually talking.
What you're actually talking to is on the B-1, you have an offensive system, weapon systems operator. So they're sitting in the belly. So you have the pilot, the co-pilot, then you have offensive and defensive weapon systems.
Sure.
So you're actually talking to the offensive weapon systems officer who's down in the belly, and she's got about a million screens in front of her, and a keyboard and a mouse and a joystick. It's like a video game.
Sure. Well, so so first they came in and they did a show of force. And that thing went supersonic right over Barge Matal. I remember we were up we were pretty low, and it was almost at eye level. It was scary how low it was flying. So it came in, and I just remember everything going silent for a second, because even the enemy was just fuck. You know what I mean? Like, it's here.
Dude.
But then it's scary. And the fact that it can bomb multiple targets in one pass, I don't think they saw that coming. I think that was a problem for them because it was, there were four like peaks around us, and all four of them got obliterated in one pass.
Dude, one, I just want to say, in case anybody who's listening or watching doesn't understand, the B1 is probably the most impressive cast platform.
So awesome.
Yeah,
it's so awesome.
Everybody loves the A10. The A10s are great. You got gun runs. You got 16 hard points for weapon systems. The B1, though, like the idea that this thing can scream in at full afterburner and burst the sound barrier after flying 2,400 miles or whatever it was to this specific area.
Yeah.
And while everybody thinks the B-52, but the B-1 has the larger payload. It has a larger payload than the B-52. The B-52 has a more diverse payload, but the B-1 is super impressive. But as impressive as that was, and actually it's funny, you get a female on the net. As a JTAC, same thing. I had, Freedom 1-1, some Navy pilot who was flying above. Man, it just happens. You get a female. Everybody on the team is like, "Oh, hey, why don't you just turn on that radio speaker?" And
turn that up. Animals, man.
Dude,
Animals.
yeah, Freedom 1-1. My team will never forget her. They have no idea who she is, but she left an impression.
Well, interesting story though. So I'm back in South Dakota after I get out. And I'm actually going on Ellsworth, and I see a guy walking in his flight suit, and he has, the Air Force they wear. If they're an A-10 pilot, they have like the little A-10 on there. If they're a B-1,
the little SOA, yeah,
they have a little SOA. He has a B-1. So I stop him, and I'm just like, hey man, like this is weird. I was in Afghanistan in 2009. I was in this place called Barge Matal, and these B-1 bombers kept like coming to save our lives, right? And I just wanted to know, and he's like, I know exactly who that was, right? And so he's like, hold on, and he like calls, and they like come out. I was like at the post exchange or whatever, and they like come out to the parking lot. They like drive from their from work, and I got to chat with them. So it was super cool to meet. And it wasn't all of them, obviously, but I got to meet a couple of the pilots and stuff, and they were like, wow, we've never been able to meet one of the guys on the ground. And I said, I'm like, man, it's almost a shame that we're never connected with the air power, because it is like those guys hear us on the ground and they're worried, they're hearing us, like you said, however many thousands of miles away. And they, they're doing everything they can down to, I know on one sortie, it was like one of the B-1 like had an engine failure. And so they had to like dump all the fuel and land it, and then they like the maintenance crews had to like get another one ready to go, right? And then it had a problem and it had to dump its fuel and land. So 3 B-1 bombers, literally like this crew somewhere in the middle of nowhere somewhere else on an airbase, did everything they could to get a B-1 bomber out to us in the middle of Afghanistan. They didn't even know where it was going. It's just kind of crazy, like the massive. We are an empire. Who is like, that's something that I would tell my guys is like, we are an empire, dude. There's assets everywhere in the world. There's satellites, there's bombers, there's planes. It's crazy, man. It really is crazy.
We can project power anywhere in the world.
Yeah,
and you're absolutely right. But I mean, beyond the air power, because that day, honestly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there were plenty of things going on the ground that were noteworthy.
COP Keating or
no
of Barge Matal.
Barge Matal, yeah.
I mean we can talk about Barge Matal too. I mean that was
but again, it's another decisive moment in Afghanistan. So I mean, go ahead. I
won't go all the way.
Go for it, dude.
We'll save the Barge Matal story for another time.
Dude, perfect. I love it.
But it was just another. I mean, Afghanistan was about, fighting at elevation, and it was a lot of lessons learned. And quite frankly, I think a lot of those lessons are going to be lost because I don't know. And maybe there's some officer out there who is compiling information for some field manual on mountain warfare, lessons learned, and this isn't alpine warfare. It's different, right?
Yeah.
There's like high altitude warfare that's different than, you know, like when you're on skis and shit, that's different than when you're just hoofing up a mountain, right? So I don't know if somebody's compiling that, but I think, you know, if we ever go back to a mountainous region, I'll kind of end it with this, that there's going to be some private who has a machine gun, and his Army doctrine is going to teach him that he should have a tripod, and he should have a 50-round starter belt, and, you know, and he should have both barrels and all this weird stuff. And he's going to find out the hard way that, you know, for fighting in the mountains, it's different. You know, he shouldn't carry his equipment as if he's in a flat land engagement. And he's going to find out the hard way because we're not writing it down. And that's kind of the thing that worries me about it.
I mean, I hope that somebody had taken the.
Listen, West Point cadets, get on it if you're listening.
Well, hold on. if we're gonna put our faith in that, I don't know if you just saw that social media post that came out of West Point with the cadet, and he had the lens cover on his M68 CCO.
Yeah, that might be the reason, though. He's more qualified to just write this report. You know what I mean? Like, if we're being serious, he knows his
place.
Yeah, he should just put together this awesome report, slideshow thing. And, yeah, I mean, I think it would be a good idea. So if you're out there listening, West Point cadet, get it done. Like, that could be your, you know, or whatever. There's some, like, I don't know, officers are weird. They do continuing education. Maybe that, you know, do your master's degree on mountain warfare, if that's a thing.
Asymmetric mountain warfare, baby.
There you go, yeah. Gun team stuff.
Absolutely. Adam, well, we don't want to keep you. You've been great, as always. We'll bring you back to keep these stories coming because I think it's kind of just an oral history because, like you said, who knows if anybody's writing this down? You know?
No, absolutely. We're sure as hell not. Nobody from my battalion is, right?
So we'll just keep running it as an oral history. So, dude, I can't thank you enough. It's always a pleasure having you on. Guys, if you haven't checked it out, if you guys just take a look right here.
Oh, God, here we go. Shameless plug.
Listen, I'll shamelessly plug it, man. Because,
plug it.
Dude, it's the best kit I own. It is. Hands down. Well,
you need the thing, though. The thing is the next.
Well, hold on. This thing is getting replaced very soon.
Yeah.
With part of that system. And the thing, I'm very excited.
The thing was built for JTACs.
I know. I'm very excited for it.
We're talking dual radios. We're talking pouches. We're talking a chest piece that can carry your ATAC device. Yeah, it's all there. It's a test rig still, but.
So, guys, if you haven't checked out Spiritus Systems, they make the best kit on the market. Adam, thanks so much, brother. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, dude. Be well.